might do for brain development. And I would like to explain this in a few minutes. So when you think about how the brain works, and specifically think about memory, how you remember things, and learning, there's two different types. One type are things that you can name, that are explicitly in your mind, in your consciousness. It's called explicit memory. These are things like, for example, maps, how your house is laid out, where the rooms are in your house. You could draw a map anytime. These are other things like if somebody wants to ask you what is the capital of the United States of America. Anyway, so those are explicit things that we learn. A lot of science and technology is based on explicit memory. However, there's a second type that is at least as important, and that is implicit. And implicit memory are things that you have learned, but you can actually name directly in your consciousness. And let me give you an example that I like to cite, which is running downstairs. I don't know if you've ever tried to run downstairs and think about at the same time where you put your steps, because the minute you think of your feet when you're trying to run downstairs, you'll fall. Because it doesn't work this way. You can't think about it. There's another example, is learning how to play an instrument in music. If you are a musician and you learn how to play an instrument, the minute you start thinking about how you're actually supposed to move, or where you put your fingers, or how you control your voice, or whatever music you're involved in, the music falls. It becomes useless because you can't. These are implicit skills. And learning a language as a child is, I think, the most important implicit skill. Because a child, when it first learns a language, it doesn't matter if it's the first, second, or fifth language, it's really the same. The brain has basically total capacity for many, many different things. And when a child learns a language, it doesn't learn vocabulary, it doesn't learn things explicitly. It learns things by speaking and listening. It learns things without being consciously aware of it. And in general, how children develop is that initially, children primarily learn implicitly. And only later on in development, in their teens, do humans really become very good at explicit learning. The relationship between these two types of learning is actually very interesting, and I don't think we quite understand it. But I think there is no doubt, at least in my mind, that the capacity to learn implicitly is something that can be developed mentally, supported and expanded, and that the ability to implicitly think and learn without being conscious of it has a tremendous effect on creativity in the explicit area of our brains. So in other words, to be able to come up with a new idea is not a consciously planned process. If you plan to come up with a new idea, you won't have it. You can't. Okay? New ideas come out of nowhere, but they don't really come out of nowhere. They come out of, in some ways, the implicit part of how your brain works. So coming back to an immersion program, I think that immersion programs in language learning are not only good because they give children more skills later in life. They do. But I don't think that that's the main reason why they're good. I think the main reason why they're good is because immersion learning provides the child with another sort of learning experience that trains the mind, develops the mind in future. So it gives the mind, if you want, more capacity in the long term. And as a result, children, I believe, who have learned more than one language, have a better chance of fully developing the potentials of their brains. And in some ways, the stuff we've heard today about the fact that even though the children that are in these programs learn two languages, they're still better at English, or at least as good as English as people who don't, attests to that effect. That basically tells you that you don't need to devote 100% of your brain to English in order to be just as good as somebody who does devote 100% of their brain to English. And for this reason, I think just basically on how I view children's development and the development of the brain, it is very, very important to foster this. And in fact, I think a lot of our educational system is overemphasizing explicit learning, science, mathematics, instead of fostering implicit learning early on, which is basically languages, arts, music, things like this, because explicit learning can always be learned later when the child is ready. Implicit learning, for example, languages, cannot. There's a critical period. If you miss it, like I missed it, as you can hear from my accent, it's over. And so, just to illustrate this with an admittedly extreme example from science history, in fact, something that I've always been impressed by is there was a very famous and actually one of the leading physicists of the last century, Werner Heisenberg, who founded a whole area in physics. And in his autobiography that he wrote many years ago, he mentioned that when he was in high school, up to the end of high school in Germany at that time, more than 100 years ago, he actually had no education in physics, math, or so whatsoever. He learned Greek and Latin. He was fluent in Latin when he got out of school. Actually, I knew a lot of Latin too when I got out of school. Nevertheless, after high school, he started from zero to study physics. And his view was that that didn't really matter because, obviously, of his talents. Maybe not everybody would have the same talents, but he could easily learn quickly all those facts. But what he couldn't learn is sort of this implicit capacity of the brain to put things together, connect things, and deal with facts. And so, for this reason, I think that having an immersion program is a terrific idea for any child. And for a number of reasons, you could sort of favor one language over another. I'm actually not sure whether Chinese is a more suitable language than, let's say, Spanish or Arabic. But I do think it's a more suitable language than Latin, for sure. I've never used Latin again in my life. Should have covered at least. I would have true. And there is a lot to say to have many different choices. And so, for example, I think that school districts, it would be good to have not just a Spanish immersion program, but also to have a Chinese immersion program, because these serve different areas, different interests, and they're both languages that are going to have a tremendous future in terms of use internationally.